Hello, everyone. Oh man, I see. I take one night off or take a night off, and what happens? I have all kinds of issues. I forgot to start the captioning. Hold on. All right, there we go. Now I need to get my other one back, and there it is. All right. Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. And of course, I mess things up all the time, it seems. Well, just in case you guys are wondering, I actually do have, I had to update my computer this past weekend, update the operating system. So in doing so, I did try doing some checks and balances and things like that, but do not be surprised if something goes completely awry tonight, because because I did that, everything else, all of the underlying programs and everything that I run to run this, and it just sometimes it can produce unexpected results. No, this is not a Windows machine. I don't care for Windows. And no, it is not an Apple machine either. This is a Linux machine, and that I use to stream with, and it is my preference. And unfortunately, I got dragged kicking and screaming into it. Hey, I want to give a few shout outs here. One to Melissa Faith over on Facebook. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you are able to catch the show. And Music Man, I know. He kind of hit me a little bit below the belt, because he mentioned the fact that I didn't put Trump's birthday in the title. Well, there's no real reason why I didn't, other than the fact that, Trump's birthday is a celebratory day to take effect and that kind of stuff, and I'm certainly not going to have a problem. But the thing about it is that I just wanted to say, happy birthday to him. But the big things are, of course, Flag Day, which is what I have behind me. And I just noticed my green screen is a little off. Oh my goodness, it's really off tonight. So my green screen, there we go. Now I got it. All right, so my green screen, of course, is up. I've got a waving flag in the background. That is the, and today is the United States Army birthday. So I have that here. The third thing, of course, is today is National Bourbon Day. And so tonight, to celebrate, I am drinking Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Yes, Buffalo Trace Bourbon Whiskey. And also, my wife decided to surprise me. She was going to give this to me over Father's Day, which is coming up on Sunday. So I have a Father's Day special coming up, or will be coming up this weekend for Saturday's show. But this right here is a new glass that she got me. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it says "We the People." It's got the American flag on it. Let me put it down a little bit further here, closer to my darker shirt, so you guys can see it. It says "We the People," and it has a bullet. This is an actual copper bullet coming into the glass. And so there we go. That is tonight's glass, and that glass actually came from the Lucky Shot Heritage Collection. You can go and check them out at LuckyShotUSA.com. LuckyShotUSA.com. And you can get glasses that'll have that in them, and a bunch of other things too. I mean, it's really good. But go to LuckyShotUSA.com and you'll get it. You can pick it up there. But yeah, she got me this glass. She wanted to give it to me for tonight's show, because this is the show. This is it. It's Pantsless Wednesday. It's Whiskey Wednesday. It's Flag Day. It's Trump's birthday. It's Bourbon, National Bourbon Day. I mean, oh my gosh. Just so much going on, so much going on. And not only that, but there's a shite ton going on in the news. In fact, so much that I don't know if I'm able to catch everything. I don't think I am. I'm not even going to try. But anyway, so hopefully you're enjoying your adult beverage safely and securely tonight. And of course, everything going on. Well, tonight's sponsor affiliate, I haven't talked about this in a while. So tonight's sponsor affiliate is actually my own store.whiskeymusings.online. That is store.whiskeymusings.online. Yes, I do actually have an online store. I do have products that are out with my logo and my saying. I've got sweatshirts, t-shirts, water bottles, mugs, pint glasses. I wish I had a shot glass. Still looking for it. But I wish I had a shot glass. And yeah, so someday I'll get one in the store. But hey, there's tank tops, there's t-shirts, there's women's wear, there's just all kinds of things. If you can go and you can peruse it. As you can see, you know, men's t-shirts, women's t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, tank tops, all the clothing line there, hardware for the office. I actually have like a desk pad. I know today everybody on the Mark K show, everybody was kind of, well, I won't say everybody, but somebody had a problem with no mouse pad for Jay Bose. Well, I've got a office pad. You can see as soon as it comes up here. This is an office pad that would go completely across, or a desk pad, I should say, that would go completely across and hold your keyboard and your mouse and act as a mouse pad and so on and so forth. So I thought it was kind of funny that they mentioned it. But other accessories like hats, phone cases, bags, fanny packs. Yes, fanny packs. I know. Steel tumblers, pint glasses, so on and so forth. But anyway. So go check it out at store.whiskeymusings, all one word, all lowercase, .online. And I would appreciate it because obviously when you purchase something from the store, you will, of course, well, that's interesting. I wonder why it came up with that. But anyway, you will obviously support the show in the process. So I do appreciate that. All right. Oh, let's kind of get into it. So the big story, of course, was yesterday with the Trump indictment, him showing up into court and basically, you know, I don't know if they actually went through the process of him getting arrested or what the deal was, because obviously they didn't allow anybody in the courthouse. Smart thing. But anyway, he did end up leaving and gave a speech after. And here's the thing. Just like with the Alvin Bragg situation, the main issue here is not so much whether or not Trump did the, whether or not he did what they are claiming. Has nothing to do with, I mean, realistically, yeah, that's okay. That's it. But it really doesn't have anything to do with that, because of the plain and simple fact that they are attempting to do something that realistically, outside of Bill Clinton, has never been tried before. Now, Bill Clinton was brought up on charges against the Presidential Records Act. The difference here is that Trump is being tried for treason under the espionage under the Espionage Act, and specific things that that they believe, or at least that Jack Smith, who, by the way, has anybody noticed somebody did this? I don't know if you remember the 80s, the Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman. But he won, I think it was Superman 2. where he went up against Zod, and somebody on the social media, I think it was Twitter, went and put a photo of the character Zod up against Jack Smith. And let me tell you, there are a lot of similarities there. A lot of similarities. But anyway, so the biggest thing obviously here is that they're attempting to do something that has never been done before, and that is charging and trying the man for espionage and parts of espionage under the Espionage Act. Now, you know, I listen to a bunch of different pundits. I listen and you know, watch over people like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino. And Mark Levin had a very clear and interesting take as a part of his podcast or his radio show. And he basically states that the Espionage Act itself was never intended to cover presidents. That the mere fact that they're doing this is, under the Espionage Act is questionable at best. Now, if you recall the Bragg case, with the Bragg case up in New York, Bragg is essentially putting forth what would be considered a legal theory. And that legal theory is essentially that you can take state misdemeanors, and if there's enough of them, you can turn it into a felony, and then of course charge him for that. Again, the whole thing about this case. All right, look, there is a tape. It is reportedly of Donald Trump. Sounds like him, but it is reportedly of Donald Trump saying that he has records that were not declassified, that he was showing them to people, etc. One thing that you have to understand is, although that stuff is out there and it might get tried in the court of public opinion where people would think, oh yeah, okay, you know, that makes sense. But the fact of the matter is that they're going to have to prove that in court, provided they move forward with this, and none of the motions that I'm sure are being flurry of motions being thrown in there. But one of the things that, like, Bill Barr keeps talking about how, you know, oh my gosh, all of this stuff is damning and it's going to be he's going to be toast. The fact of the matter is that when you boil it all down, first of all, the Presidential Records Act was the one that was used in order to essentially get the warrant to go in and search the premises. So the warrant itself is going to come into play, and whether or not the warrant was overly broad. Now, if you remember on this program, I talked about that, to where a warrant has to be, under the Fourth Amendment, it has to be very specific. It has to describe the item. It has to describe what the item essentially, you know, why are you looking for that item? And it has to describe where you believe the item exists within the home. And if you recall, when the warrant was served, they were going in and searching everything, including Melania's underwear drawer. That's not the way a warrant is supposed to work. So I'm fairly certain that that's probably going to come up as a part of the defense. And the other thing, of course, too, is the fact that, and even though, I mean, on social media, and I'll be honest with you, I spend a bunch of time on Twitter, mostly because it's a cesspool of leftist scum and villainy. But I get into the Twitter, and there's a lot of talk about how, you know, the Presidential Records Act doesn't apply, or, you know, as I've talked about, that the whole thing with Clinton's sock drawer doesn't apply. Well, actually it does. And the reason being is because of the fact, in Ted Lieu in particular, has constantly talked about this. He's like, well, you know, the Clinton records, they were private records. They were not, what are they? Classified records. Well, as I pointed out to Ted, responding to him on Twitter, if Clinton's tapes did not include classified information, and he could prove that they did not include classified information, then there would have been no case. It would have been dismissed outright. So the mere fact that there was a case that had to get adjudicated in court proves, beyond a reasonable doubt, that there was classified information on those tapes that were being stored in Clinton's sock drawer. Now, as a result of that sock drawer case, the presiding judge over the top of that case made it very clear that the president is the one who solely has power to declassify information, that there is no process, basically, in terms of how that stuff gets declassified, meaning that all the president has to do, realistically, is demonstrate through act or through his statements that it is declassified. And the thing about it is that just the mere act of Trump taking them with him outside of a skiff is an indication of the fact that that information has now been declassified. And it's kind of interesting that they are still trying to say that Trump is claiming, that he was hiding stuff, so on and so forth. But realistically, once he packed him up and put him into his personal records and packed him up to leave the White House, that would have been a pretty good indication that, one, because he was still president while that was happening, that one, those items would have been considered declassified, and two, that they were part of his personal records because he put them in boxes and he took them with him. So again, this is a lot of stuff that is going to have to come out to be essentially proven by the plaintiff, meaning the United States of America, in order for this to go. So this is going to be very, very interesting to watch. Now, the other case that is key to this whole thing is the Hillary Clinton emails case. And that's key because of the fact that James Comey, who was the director of the FBI at the time that in that case and that investigation was going on, he just randomly decided, I'm not going to refer this to prosecution because no prosecutor will pick this up. And so what you end up with in that particular case, and keep in mind, a lot of people are like, oh, no, there was nothing ever proven and so on and so forth. And the FBI said that she did nothing wrong. I'm sorry, but she did do something wrong. And even Comey said it in the press briefing. He said there is evidence of potential criminal wrongdoing here, but no prosecutor will pick it up to try it. So essentially what ends up happening is, if you interpret that, that literally boils down to, yep, she did something wrong. She did something criminal, but because we're not going to bother to enforce it, she gets off. That's what that means. And so what ends up happening here is that now you're looking at what is potentially, and I'm going to say actually is, but what is potentially a complete political smear of the leading candidate for the opposition party from the current party in power. And so what does that make it? Well, pretty much makes it a banana republic, a totalitarian system that when you go and sick the law dogs after your political opponents, that's some third world stuff. And that is essentially, honestly, what's going on here. Now, this actually does do something for the Democrat Party. And you're asking me, what? What does this do? What does this do? Well, let me explain. The entire news cycle is being taken up literally by the Trump indictment. The entire news cycle is literally being taken up by Trump's comments, Trump's actions, whether or not he's going to get indicted or not. What are the defense? What is this? What is that? And they are literally, not even the Republicans are not talking about Biden. Now, this isn't my idea. This is actually, Ben Shapiro brought this up, little hat tip to him, for bringing this up, but he's right on this case. For 2024's election to be successful for the Republicans, okay, we have to adjudicate the difference between Joe Biden and his extremely insane and screwed up administration, and all of the bad things that Biden has been doing under the table, like the $10 million that all of a sudden I'm hearing just all of a sudden showed up on his tax form in 2017. His IRS, his tax, I can't even think of what it's called. 1024, whatever it is. Anyway, the tax form, it all of a sudden showed up there. And so now we're kind of like, wait a minute, if that all of a sudden showed up, that extra $10 million, that's interesting. Now that is unconfirmed. I'm not gonna tell you that that's confirmed, but that's what I'm hearing from a couple of different sources. They've already been sort of talking about it. Now, assuming that that is true, then now what you're doing is you're now seeing another angle where they're trying to cover up the Biden corruption, the Biden bribery scheme. We've already talked about the 1023 form that's part of the FBI. I've argued that on Twitter a few times with other people where these, leftist lunatics are saying, oh, it's all hearsay. No, it's not hearsay. It's actually a credible source went to the FBI. That source has provided with consistent and true information in the past. And so because of that, the FBI went ahead and filled out an internal form, which is designed to spur a investigation, but didn't. And so now what's happening essentially with this whole thing is the entire news cycle is pointed at Trump, Trump, Trump. And nobody is talking, obviously, about the Biden family, the Biden corruption, any things that the Biden administration has been doing. So all of this is all distracting from what should be the actual events when it comes to the challenging of the Republicans to the incumbent Democrats. It really should be an adjudication of the last 4 years. So this is all part of it. Now, the Epoch Times has a piece on the legal strategy, and let me go ahead and get to that. On the legal strategy that Trump outlined in his post-arraignment speech. And part of this has to deal with some of the things that I was talking about. After so Trump spoke to the crowd and some family members hours after pleading not guilty to 37 counts of charges linked to his handling of classified documents. He is correct in saying that it's a political hit job. Totally. In outlining his defense, he particularly focused on the Presidential Records Act of 1978. Now, this is not all that out there to focus on that. However, what we do need to make sure of is that that's not the only thing that it's focused on. Now, Trump talks about how the act gives the presidential discretion to determine which records are personal and which are presidential, and as a result belong to the public. Now, it's actually not the Presidential Records Act that necessarily brings that into the fold, although it does discuss it. But what is key here is, again, the Clinton sock drawer opinion and decision. That's what literally states, because the judge literally stated in her opinion, the president has full plenary authority to decide what is and is not personal records. That's basically how Clinton got away with putting the recordings in his sock drawer. So, you know, the precedent has been set. The legal precedent has already been set. It's already been adjudicated, and it's been shown that the president and the president alone makes that decision. Now, speaking about that, I got fact-checked supposedly on Facebook by USA Today saying that the vice president has authority, and he actually doesn't. That was an executive order put in by Obama that was immediately rescinded by Trump when he got elected. So, and it's not, constitutionally, the only person who has that authority is the president. Now, again, this is assuming that we go after the Presidential Records Act, which again, also out of that decision with the sock drawer, was that it was a civil matter and not a criminal one. In fact, there is not any criminal statute under the Presidential Records Act. So because, and this is another thing to discuss with the lawyers, but because there is no criminal statute for it, the FBI never should have been able to swear out a warrant, because there's no reason for the FBI to have been involved. If the Presidential Records Act is clearly and concisely a civilian matter, there's no warrant that needs to be put out, because that's for criminal cases. So there shouldn't have even been a warrant thing. It should have been just the National Archives taking Trump to court and, you know, arguing that in front of a judge in a civilian court. So, yeah, so this is interesting how this is all going to come about. And again, I'm not, I don't think this is really going to go anywhere. Honestly, I think this is just another smoke and mirrors ploy, just like the Bragg case. But I did hear a report, speaking of the Bragg case, I did hear a report that Letitia James up in New York is suspending the Bragg case because of the fact that this is going on. So and also I'm hearing as well that the whole Georgia case, they keep talking about how Georgia is going to indict him as well. Well, that might be on hold too, because they're all waiting with essentially very stinky, cheesy breath to see whether or not Donald Trump is actually going to go to jail for whatever this is, which it's not. I mean, I'll be, again, if the defense team is smart and intelligent, they can make arguments that will basically allow Trump to essentially get the case dismissed. But anyway, yeah, here's a picture of Jack Smith. Look at him. Now, if you put him up against the General Zod character from the 80s Superman, I'm telling you, they look very close to one another. Anyway. Somebody made that comparison. I loved it. I mean, I personally, I thought it was great. I thought it was great. All right. So another thing happened this past weekend, which, was questionable at best. And that was that Biden hosted a Pride Month celebration. Now, speaking of Pride Month, if you have a social media account, I've been advocating this on, advocating this on Twitter. We should every day put the hashtag American Pride Month, all one word, and post a photo or a GIF or GIF, however you want to pronounce it, of the United States flag. So American Pride Month for every day this month, American Pride Month with a GIF or GIF of the flag or a photo of the flag. That's what you should do. That's our pride. Okay. Now, as you can see here in the photo, we have the pride flag sitting in between two American flags on the left and to the right. Now, there was some question, and a lot of people on Twitter, in fact, it was really, really big when, from Twitter, it was big enough of an uproar that they, it ended up becoming a news story. It was kind of interesting. But yeah. So, the flags here, as you can see, there was some question as to whether or not this was a violation of U.S. flag code law. And for those of you who are interested, if you want to know the proper ways to display the flag and when to display it and all of these other things, you can look up Title IV of the U.S. Code. Just put in U.S. Code Title IV and it'll bring you right to it. But the particular section that was in question was Section 7. And Section 7 talks about how the United States flag is supposed to be higher than and to the right of any other flags. And by the way, that right is the right of the viewer, the observer. Okay. But they, anyway, the point being here is that there was some question as to whether or not they violated a flag code. I even brought it up and said it may be a violation. And, the one thing about the United States flag code, seriously, and I've had this before because I've had this discussion before. I mean, you're not supposed to use the U.S. flag as bedding. And there was a long time ago, I'm talking like 15, 20 years, there was a ad by a mattress company that had a couple. I'm going to say a couple. I can't remember if it was a gay couple or a straight couple, but they were in bed and they were draped with the American flag. And that is specifically forbidden. You are not supposed to use the flag as bedding. So, the whole thing about the Title IV and the U.S. flag code is the fact that none of it's enforced. It really isn't. I mean, hardly any of it is enforced. Because things like flying your flag at night without a light on it. And by the way, there's like no specifics on how bright the light has to be. It just describes to where you have to be able to make out what the flag is. You can't like just leave it in darkness. You're supposed to have some sort of a light on there that would, make it so that you can actually recognize the stars and stripes. But that could be, anything. I mean, that's kind of a nebulous type of a deal. So there's a lot of parts of the U.S. flag code that are questionable, not questionable, but that are not enforced. And, people tend to bend that law without a problem because there really isn't any criminal penalties for it. There's no civilian penalties for it either. They don't really define anything in terms of what the penalty would be if you violate that law. So it's really, honestly, more of a guideline. But one thing caught my eye with this, and I kept thinking about this over the weekend, and of course, the last couple of days. And this is really where the question comes into play. Is it possible, given the right circumstances and right definitions, is it possible that somebody could make the claim that the whole pride movement push by this administration could be considered a violation of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment? And the reason that I say that is because of the fact that we've got so many people who are pushing this. I mean, if you look at it, you've got people in schools, you've got schools that are doing it. In fact, there's a case here recently where the school mandated that the students wear rainbow colors in order to celebrate Flag Day, or sorry, not Flag Day, but celebrate Pride Month. And one of the things that happened was some of the students objected to it, wore red, white, and blue, and wore black. And then, of course, went around and like ripped down, displays and things like that because they had it shoved down their throats so much that they had had enough of it. And so in doing so, the students obviously that did it went and got, they had disciplinary action. And so now the school district itself is probably going to get sued by the parents. In fact, I think that's where the story starts, is that the parents are suing the school district for disciplining their children for essentially being forced to take part of a celebration that the kids did not want to take part of. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting when you look at things like that. You look at the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion types of things that are being pushed down. And when you look at something like, for an example, the entire thought process when it comes to, essentially, if you don't jump into the whole transgender thing or whatever, that you're going to get into trouble with this. Now, give me just a second here. I want to make sure my next. Yeah. So, let me go ahead and bring this up. So this got published. This is a report. It's about 110, 115 pages, I guess, that was put out by a committee or a sub department of the Department of Health and Human Services. And within this report, they literally state that Joe Biden's executive orders and other law is making it so that states that do not support the transgender ideology and support gender affirming care, that they can withhold federal money from hospitals that don't support it. In fact, they're even recommending that they withhold federal money. So when you look at that and you start to add up, okay, there's the whole transgender ideology. You have to be accepting of somebody's essentially, let's face it, mental delusion that they are born in the wrong body and the wrong sex and so on and so on. It doesn't even matter if they're the wrong sex. I mean, it's even goes so far as, oh, today I want to be today I feel like I'm a lion or I'm a bird or whatever. And, so this essentially, it's stuff like this that makes you wonder, did somebody make a case that the pride, and I'm putting it all together in a group, but the pride ideology could be considered a religion? And so because of that, excuse me for just a second. Because of that, I started asking what actually constitute a religion. And I got to thinking about it and I was like, okay, well, obviously there's the obvious things. First, in terms of like a Christian religion or the Muslim religion or any of what we would consider an organized religion is generally a belief in a supreme being. Okay. All right. So, we could go with that as part of it. And so I went and I found this site, and this site here talks about, this is humanreligions.info. And it basically asks, what is a religion, or what is religion and how do you define religion? And so the short definition that they provide is religions are shared collections of transcendental beliefs that have been passed on from believers to converts, that are held by adherents to be actively meaningful and serious, and either based on one, formally documented doctrine, such as a Bible, for an example, or established cultural practices, which would be like a folk religion. So say Wiccan or something like that, that may not actually have a written down Bible. I'm only using Wiccan. I don't know. But the thing here, though, is that it seems kind of interesting that there really isn't like a formal, description. I mean, we sort of like, we say that we know what religion is, but we don't really, I mean, there isn't really a defined definition of it. And the reason being is the reason that I'm bringing this up is because in the military, they actually have recognized over 250 religions. They've actually recognized over 250 religions. And so because of that, I was kind of like, okay, well, you know, this whole religion thing, maybe there's a legal definition for it. And as I started looking into the whole legal definition, I found that even the lawyers don't even know. In fact, there have been cases that have gone off to the Supreme Court, even when dealing with things like, for an example, the United States versus Ballard, which was the first case that was demonstrated. And the Supreme Court, when it finally got to the Supreme Court actually said, look, we're not here to adjudicate whether or not a religion exists, but we need to come up with a way or a methodology to determine whether or not someone in their beliefs that it could be considered in their viewpoint as a religion. And so from this article that I found here, talks about this. As in the case of United States versus Ballard demonstrates, the Supreme Court must look into the sincerity of a person's beliefs to help decide if those beliefs constitute a religion that deserves constitutional protection. And of course, part of this is because of the fact that the Constitution actually doesn't specify religion, which when you look at, you know, American history, you understand why. I mean, there was Quakers, there was Puritans, there was evangelicals, there was Jewish people of the Jewish faith. There were all different types of faiths. There were deists who believed in religion that was not revealed, like the Bible shows. You know, the Bible demonstrates what God is. And there were deists who didn't believe in the Bible itself, that natural, God reveals himself in natural ways and all of these different things. And so the founders and the framers of the Constitution couldn't put that down into words because they couldn't afford to exclude anyone else. And so what they ended up doing is they ended up making it just a generic concept of, it's a religion. And so therefore the state, or in this case, the government itself, cannot establish one. Now, you know, in past episodes, I've talked about how the wall of separation of church and state, which is commonly used in a common fashion, talking about how government is supposed to stay out of religion and religion is supposed to stay out of government. We know that's false. Okay, we know that's false. However, what it does mean is that the government itself cannot mandate a religion, such as England mandating that everyone be part of the Church of England, which is exactly what the framers did not want. That was the whole purpose of them coming over here, was to gain religious freedom. But that didn't mean that you couldn't use religious references in terms of making what would be man's law. And that's where the breakdown comes into play, because Thomas Jefferson wrote it once in a letter when he was president, and it's been taken out of context in most cases, that several people believe that the wall of separation of church and state means that church and state need to be completely 100% separate. And that is entirely false. But anyway, I get back to the case. So what did they do? Well, it involved the case itself, the Ballard case, United States versus Ballard, actually involved the conviction of a bunch of organizers of what they called the I Am movement. The I Am movement apparently had the belief, the followers of it had the belief that they could heal people with supernatural powers. from incurable illnesses. And so I guess a bunch of people, went to them and wanted to get healed, and they ended up being, they ended up dying, and so on and so forth. And so the apparently, the case went on. I didn't get into too many of the details of the case, but the important part of this is that the Supreme Court held that the jury, in determining the line between the free exercise of religion and the punishable offense of obtaining property under false pretenses, they were not supposed to decide on whether or not the claims of the IM members were actually true, only whether or not the members honestly believed them to be true, thus qualifying the group as a religion under the Supreme Court's broad definition. So think about that for a second. So essentially what the Supreme Court was saying back in 1944, when this case was adjudicated, is that you don't have to actually have, specific items in terms of a religion. You just have to have a belief in something, and that belief could then, as long as you yourself believe it, could then be considered a religion under the law. So here's the thing. If we take that and we put it and juxtapose it against the whole pride group, where men believe that they can be women and women believe that they can be men, or they can be whatever they want to be, wouldn't that be considered a religion according to that Supreme Court case? Because they believe in their mind, even though physically on the outside they have twig and berries, or they have a valley, or they have, all the secondary sex characteristics that would be considered from a biological standpoint. That they are either male or female of the human species, but instead it is their belief that causes whether or not they are of a religion. And so that actually made me consider and go a little bit farther. So apparently there was another court case that was up against, it was brought by the Equal Opportunity, the EEOC. I can't remember what all the letters stand for, but it was on behalf of workers who objected to mandatory activities in a program called Harnessing Happiness. Okay. And the jury awarded $5.1 million damages for religious coercion. Okay. So in the case, a judge determined that the judge determined that the beliefs and exercises in question qualified as religious under the Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of religion in the workplace. The Supreme Court still, to the date of this was written in 2018. Yeah, this article was written May 3rd, 2018. And the Supreme Court still has not addressed how to define a religion for purposes of a Title VII employment discrimination issue. Okay. So the judge described the proper analysis in the Second Circuit in this way. To determine whether a given set of beliefs constitutes a religion for the purposes of either the First Amendment or Title VII, the courts frequently evaluate two things. One, whether the beliefs are sincerely held, and two, whether they are in the believer's own scheme of things religious. In analyzing the second factor, whether a set of beliefs in the believer's own scheme of things religious, the courts look to whether the belief system involves ultimate concerns. So, again, that's clear as mud. I'll be honest. But the thing about it is here we are. We're looking again at the entire idea of this pride ideology. Could it be considered, in a legal sense, a religion? And based off of this, all you really need in order to be considered a religion, according to the courts, is whether or not you have a sincere belief in whatever it is that you are espousing. There's no other, it seems like there's no other qualification here. And so if we look at the Pride movement, okay, and we look at the whole idea where men can be women and women can be men, and children need to be, children can just pop out and respect, the fact that they want to be a girl one day and then they want to be a boy the next, or, they want to actually go and change complete sexes and do sexual mutilation on their bodies, which is irreversible, by the way. And it kind of makes you wonder, if that's the legal definition, then could somebody sue the administration, the Biden administration, for establishment of a religion? Because they are pushing down the entire, if you do not believe in the woke or in the pride ideology, okay? If you do not believe in the pride ideology, then you're not part of what would be considered this religion. All right, I've got to give a shout out to Music Man. Thank you, Music Man. Gave me a Rumble rant, $5 Rumble rant. Celebration of Bourbon Day. We love you, whiskey. Shots, shots, shots. Sorry about the title shot. Vets back each other. Yeah, I do agree. Hey, it's okay. You called me to task. I get it. Not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you for that, by the way. I do appreciate that. But again, legally speaking, it is questionable, because this administration is pushing, literally pushing, for everyone to be a part of this gender speak ideology, that this is going to be, this could potentially be a big, huge deal. If somebody were to decide to attempt, and this is the thing, is that obviously you would have to attempt it in order to really and truly understand whether or not this is a legal matter. But somebody with means, opportunity, and money could possibly sue the administration under the idea that the pride ideology, transgender ideology, as it's being presented by the White House and being pushed down onto everyone, business-wise, etc., could be considered a religion. And if it's a religion, then it cannot be pushed without equal pushing of others by the U.S. government under the First Amendment, under the Establishment Clause. Because, of course, the United States government cannot establish a religion. So I know that's a lot of information, but I kind of wanted to get out there because I sort of thought, yeah, it's kind of interesting that that's the case. Now again, keep in mind, whether or not you believe in the ideology is not a question here. The question is whether or not the state, meaning the federal government or state governments, because we have state governments that are pushing all of this stuff too. And, the other thing I was thinking about as well is that there are certain aspects of some religions that we actually have outlawed. For an example, there are certain aspects of some angles of Satanism that are dealing with human sacrifice. Well, obviously that's illegal, is the human sacrifice part. So, again, Satanism could be considered a religion under the very broad definition of the Supreme Court. So I would wonder if somebody, I mean, I would love to see somebody like Elon Musk come up with the idea of suing the federal government for pushing Twitter to have to accept the pride stuff, because that would probably be where the best angle to go at it would be some business that is being affected monetarily or something along those lines with the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion rules and laws that are being pushed down, or a state. A state could easily sue the United States government over this, especially if they are withholding federal money. Withholding federal money for from that state or from its residents within that state, for not including or having bans on the whole transgender, children crossing over, all of that stuff. And again, if you want to do it, I know there are people out there, I'm sure, that are listening to this program. I know for a fact there's at least one. But I can tell you this much, that if you want to do that after you become 18, and that's all on you. I mean, and again, if you're paying for all of the surgeries and everything else, that's all on you. But the fact that you are that the movement as a whole is attempting to go after children and to push other people into believing this crap, I'm sorry, it just isn't. I mean, on an individual basis, we'll take individuals one or two, but doing it as an entire movement and a requirement by government is, I think, skirting the lines of what potentially could be considered a violation of the First Amendment. Not that this administration really cares at this point. All right, I am going to take a second. I got to find it here. Okay, I'm going to take a second. Let's go ahead and move on to our Pet of the Week.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
All right, and tonight's Pet of the Week comes from Amy over on Rumble. Let me get into that mode here. There we go. And it's the further adventures of Tormenta. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But anyway, so apparently Tormenta went to the Barn Hunt Regionals in South Carolina a few weeks ago. Apparently she didn't get any cues. I'm assuming those are qualifying points. But she hunted great. She's still the number one Belgian Tervuren or Tervuren. Wow. Hope I pronounced that correctly. But anyway, so I guess when Terv girls, that's how she pronounced it or put it in here, they are known for their death stare. They will stand stock still and stare the rats to death. So here she is with one of her death stares during the course. And here is another one. She found one in between the straw bales. Now, if you guys remember, and I'm trying to remember this correctly, but if you guys remember, basically what they do is they put the rats inside of tubes, and those tubes are, I'm imagining they have scent holes. Or breathing holes. So I can't imagine that they are sealed up in this bottle. But anyway, what they do is they hide the bottle with the rat in it, in places within straw bales, and they release the dogs to go and hunt for these, for the rats, for the animals. And so, yeah, that's basically how it works. And so thank you again for sharing us your beautiful dogs. Amy, she shows them. This little lady right here, I'm going to tell you, she does dock jumping. She does all kinds of stuff. Oh, I've been corrected here that They have one end that has a vent holes all around it. So that makes sense. Because I don't think you'd want to have the rat die inside. Anyway. So that's this week's Pet of the Week. And do me a favor, if you want your pet featured on a Wednesday Pet of the Week segment, send your submission, picture, name, breed, any other pertinent information, even if you've got a little bit of a story about them. Send them all to fans, FANS, at whiskeymusings.online, fans at whiskeymusings.online, and you can send that for your submission. I do not have any more pets of the week right now. The queue is completely empty. So if you want to get your pet onto the broadcast or Wednesday night submission, send it off to me. You've got a week from tonight. I prefer it on like Tuesday so I can prepare. But yeah. So, anyway, so that is tonight's submission for Pet of the Week. And I do, like I said, I do appreciate that immensely for that. Thank you very much for sharing her with us once again. All right. Let's see. Okay. Moving really quickly here. I've got a couple other articles and then we'll get into the Constitution Quarter. But a couple other articles here. Let me go ahead and bring this up. So, there was a poll that came out, a Gallup poll that was released Monday. This is the article in Fox News. But the Gallup poll released on Monday showed an actual increase in the number of people who believe that trans athletes should only compete against those with the same biological gender, as a comparison between 2021 and 2023. This poll, released Monday, showed that a majority of Americans believe this, and that the poll was conducted from May 1st to May 24th, and it showed a change from a similar poll that they conducted in 2021. According to Gallup, 69% of Americans believe that transgender athletes should be able to play on sports teams that match their biological gender, while only 26% believe that transgender athletes should play on teams that correspond with the gender they identify as. And, I don't even know why this isn't like 90-10 or 99-1, because there is clear scientific evidence in all cases where a biological male, especially one who has gone through puberty, has distinct physical advantages over women. Even if you compare them weight for weight, pound for pound, there is a difference. It is scientifically proven. I just don't understand why anybody would sit here and argue about this. But apparently, in 2021, the poll originally showed 62% of Americans believed that transgender athletes should be able to play on sports teams that match their biological gender, while 34% believed that they should play on teams that correspond with the gender they identify with. So what's happened here is, in the course of 2 years, we've gotten more of a movement. It's more of a 70-30 split rather than a 62-34 split. So people are starting to wake up and realize that there might be something to this idea that women should have their own sports, and these biological males who are identifying as women and jumping into the women's sports are not. It's basically a no bueno. And it's kind of funny. I made a comment on social media, which I still have yet to find anybody who can show me at any given point a biological woman who decides that she is a biological man who has jumped into men's sports and has done the exact same thing that someone like a Leah Thomas has done. In other words, completely crush men's records and times. Still waiting for an answer. Nobody has been able to give that to me. All right. Well, the Biden administration also has put their foot in it once again. This is more world politics here. So the Epoch Times released this. Biden administration confirms there's a Chinese spy base in Cuba, and par for the course, they go ahead and shift blame to Trump. So yeah, keep in mind that, again, they're covering up for the whole China crap. Now, granted that base, I've kind of skimmed through the article and have looked at a couple other things. That base has actually been there for a little bit of time. But yeah, it just, again, here we are. This guy, who is this? John Kirby claimed like a week and a half ago that there was no Chinese base on Cuba. And yeah, now we know that there is. So once again, you cannot believe these people. You just can't. You cannot believe it at all. Anything that they give you. All right. Last one here. I keep ripping on the Biden, on the Biden administration because they're just so damn stupid. But anyway, apparently a White House intern went ahead and put out a tweet that bragged about a chart with regards to inflation skyrocketing, actually saying that the tweet was, hey, look, inflation's coming down. This is fantastic. And they went ahead and put out this tweet, and they attached to it a chart that showed, how much inflation was dropping. And let me show you the chart that they put out. So this is the tweet. Well, let me see if I can increase it in size here. I got to get it a little bigger for you. So the White House tweet comes out, and it says in the tweet, great news. Today's inflation report shows annual inflation is now at the lowest level since March of 2021, less than half of what it was last June. This is giving families real breathing room. Well, what they don't show, or what the chart really does show, is Biden took office. You can kind of see the line there. Biden took office in January of 2021. And right after he takes office, all of a sudden, everything shoots up. And it's been going up. It goes from basically somewhere in the realm of 1.25% to 1.33% inflation, all the way up to just peaking a little over 9% inflation. And then as it's coming back down, of course, the inflation was 4% in this thing. Guys, folks, I'm sorry. You just need to understand, until we get inflation back below where it was when Biden took office, none of this is a victory lap. None of this is a victory lap for them. And they keep going after it over and over and over. And why? It's because of the fact that they're not stupid, but they definitely think we are. I actually kind of wonder whether or not they're stupid or not, but I can tell you this much. They definitely believe that the American public is stupid and that the American people have literally no idea what's going on. Because I even got into an argument with somebody on Twitter about this, and they were saying, oh, well, it's only 4%. Yeah, that's 4% of increase in prices year over year. The target is to be lower than 2% of increase in prices year over year. So this is just, anyway. And for those of you over on Rumble who keep asking me, can we put Bongino? I don't care. Go ahead. Say Bongino. I like Bongino. I'm unlike Mark. I like Bongino. Anyway, sorry. That's a Mark K inside joke, from the Rumblers. So yeah, you guys go ahead. I don't care. But anyway, I could just dream of being, having, having even Mark Kay's numbers. I could just dream of having his numbers and Bongino's numbers. Just fantastic. All right. So yeah, so basically the White House, and the other thing too, I don't know if anybody spotted this, but and I've posted this on various social medias, but the funny thing about it is they went ahead and posted under the Joe Biden account, the POTUS account, that they actually gained back jobs from the COVID shutdown. Now, I've been arguing, or I've been posting this for days, months even, talking about how the whole 13 million jobs that were brought back, 13 million that Biden keeps talking about, 12 million jobs, 12.7 million jobs I've created, more than anybody else. And it's like, no, you haven't. You because COVID ended, you gained back somewhere in the realm of 10 to 11 million jobs. And you've only gained roughly 2 to maybe 3 million over time. But the reality of it is that, yeah, that's the reality. Well, Joe Biden's account and his intern finally posted it. I screenshotted that bad boy. And now every time either he or Kamala Harris or anybody else talks about how this administration has made 13 million damn jobs, I'm going to post that screenshot and be like, Biden said the truth. Oh, all right. It's just, sometimes I'm telling you, they sort of shoot themselves in the foot, to be honest with you. And it's so easy if you have a longer than average memory for this stuff. All right, let's go ahead and move into the news segment for the night. Constitution Quarter. All right, and I've lost one of my lights, so obviously that charge didn't last long. Okay. So for tonight's Constitution Quarter, I want to talk a little bit. Now, last time we had discussed the Articles of Confederation and everything. And oh, by the way, before I get going too much into this, let me go ahead and show you. This is the Constitution Quarter Rumble channel. If you go there, Constitution Quarter, it is a separate Rumble channel from my channel, although I run it the same. And it is essentially just going to be this clip, this segment only in this channel. So you can come back and you can refer to the Constitution Quarter anytime that you want. All right. So last week's episode, the first episode, I talked about the Articles of Confederation and how the Articles of Confederation were the beginning of the new government and the new world, but that there were several issues with the Articles. I'm not going to go into it much, but I do want to say that, put up a link. I'm being told to put up a link. Okay. So here we go. I'll go ahead and drop this link into all of the chats. And there is the Rumble channel for that. Okay. Yep, there it goes. It goes to all of the places that I stream. All right. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight, and I don't want to go too deep into any individual ones, but what I do want to talk about tonight is the basic framing of the Constitution as we know it today. And so the basic framing that we have here is we have, of course, the preamble, which a lot of people know about. There's 52 words in it. It's very famous. Some of us were required to memorize the preamble and that kind of stuff. But they broke up the Constitution into articles, just like with the Articles of Confederation. But instead, the Articles of Confederation had 13 articles to them. The original Constitution, before it was amended, had 7. And each article was designed and designated to specific things. For an example, Article 1 covers the legislative branch. Now, one of the things that Article 1 does talk about, and if you have a copy of the Constitution of the United States, doesn't matter what one, but if you have a copy of the Constitution, you can look under Article 1, Section 8, and it defines specifically what Congress is allowed to basically legislate on in terms of the tasks that Congress is supposed to take on. And most people, just about everybody, agrees that those tasks that are defined in Article 1, Section 8 are all that the federal government is supposed to be doing. There's nothing more unless it's been added as an amendment. But based off the original Constitution, everything that is in Article 1, Section 8 is all that the Constitution and the federal government is supposed to be concerned with. And so what you might see, in my case, whenever I go on social media, if I basically say, hey, let me look in Article 1, Section 8 for this, for whatever task, which I do often on things like healthcare or abortion or, this whole, the environment, all of those kinds of things doesn't show up in Article 1, Section 8. And there isn't any amendment that covers any of this. So realistically, Congress should not be bothered with that. However, Article 2, so that's Article 1, and in particular, again, Section 8. That's the one that we really want to understand what is there, okay? In Article 2, it defines the executive branch. Who is the executive branch? That's the presidency, okay? And Article 2 is where it talks about how the president is in charge of everything that is underneath, which is a thing that I got into, or that I responded to Ted Lieu with, because he was saying, oh no, classified information can be held by different departments. Well, the only department that I am aware of at this moment that is actually formulated and doing something that is a congressional activity or an activity that is designed specifically for the Congress is the IRS. Everybody else, CIA, FBI, DOJ, EPA, all of those other, they are all organized under the executive branch. They have nothing to do. They have not been formed by any congressional statute. They get funded by congressional statutes, but they are not formulated by congressional statutes, which is part of the reason why when OSHA, the last year, OSHA had its congressional mandates, and this is why Biden got overturned, is because of the fact that OSHA was formulated by a statute, but nowhere in that congressional statute did it talk about health conditions and shots. And so that's why Biden, who was trying to get people to get their COVID shots under that statute, it was basically overturned. Okay. I got to kind of hurry this up. I'm running out of time here. But Article 3 is the judicial branch. Now, a little piece of history on Article 3. Article 3, you would think, might have been written at the same time. It wasn't. Article 3 was actually the fastest and last of the articles that were written. And this is part of the reason why the judicial branch, Article 3, is so short and very, very cryptic. What ended up happening is after the First Continental Congress, which put together, I think it's the First Continental Congress, but anyway, the first established Congress under the U.S. Constitution that met, they had to create the laws that built our legal system underneath the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court was basically the only court that was listed in Article 3. None of these district courts, none of the structure and all of that stuff, all of that came when the first congressional meeting under the U.S. Constitution actually showed up. So, yeah. So then we have Article 4, which covers states, the citizenship, and new states. In other words, what it talks about is it defines a little bit about the states themselves, how new states are being brought into the union, and then it also defines a little bit about U.S. citizenship. Now, we do have some articles some amendments that have been added to help define some of those things. Because again, Article 4, it's a little spare in terms of details. Article 5 is very important. It is the amendment process. There are two ways to amend the Constitution. One is by congressional or by Congress proposing an amendment and having it run through the process that is part of Article 5. The other, which we've had conversations on this broadcast before, on this show before, is the Convention of States. And again, that is another sparingly written space. So there's a lot of inference there. And the last two, Article 6 talks about debts, supremacy, the oaths that are taking, and honestly, religious tests. Now, there were some changes to make Article 6 no longer use those religious tests, but they are actually in there originally. And mostly what Article 6 kind of covers is that, the Congress or the U.S. Constitution, obtains all of the same debts that it had before under the Articles of Confederation, how the Constitution will be the supreme law of the land, and some of those other little details are all in Article 6. Article 7 is pretty simple. It basically just outlines that the Constitution itself is ratified. There really isn't a whole lot of laws in there. It's just more of like a formal conclusion to the entire document as it was written in the first part and accepted in 1787 and of course ratified in 1788 when it took over from the Articles of Confederation. So basically that is a quick overview of the layout of the Constitution. Now, just really quickly in terms of the preamble, because I mentioned this in the last episode of the Constitution Quarter, the statement of, in order to form a more perfect union, and as you look here, it starts obviously, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. That is a direct reference to the replacement of the Articles of Confederation with the U.S. Constitution as we know it as of being written today. And this also kind of gives an idea of what the Constitution is designed for. It's designed to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, meaning our offspring, and that they do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America. I almost sang that. I almost started singing it. Because for those of us who are of my age and maybe a little older, you'll remember Schoolhouse Rock. Every day after school, they had those little ads talking about what's a bill and the Constitution and all kinds of stuff. I wish they would bring that back. I played it once on one of my episodes, one of my Whiskey Musings Broadcast episodes, not too long ago, and ironically, I got a copyright infringement from YouTube on it. But anyway, so I wanted to cover that really, really quickly in terms of the layout. So if you're really interested, please dive into your Constitution, start reading. It is, if you can get one that is not in the scroll, like the fancy scroll script, you can go and actually look at like this one here. This is constitutioncenter.org. Constitutioncenter.org is the National Constitution Center, and it has the Constitution in it, talks about each one. So you can use this as a basis. They also have a Constitution 101 course. There's other places like the Institute on the Constitution that I advocate. The Heritage Foundation is another place where you can find them. There's like a bunch of references that are out there. And so, yeah, so use the internet for what it's for, folks. Research everything, bounce things off of each other. Don't necessarily believe in just one avenue, but bounce them off each other. All right. And that brings us to the end of the program, and that is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. do me a favor. If you like the broadcast, head on over to Rumble, rumble.com. Get an account if you don't already have one, and follow the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and hey, even the Constitution Quarter channels. I am looking to get as many followers as I can. My goal is 10,000 by the end of the year. Yeah, if I make it, great. If I don't, I'm much better off than what I am right now. But do me a favor, head on over and follow them. And I broadcast Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern and Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast channel. We will see you guys Saturday. Yes, I am transmitting Saturday. We will see you guys Saturday night for my Father's Day episode. And you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you then. Good night, everybody.
The Whiskey Musings broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.